Hello everyone. Ram Madhavji, I've never in my life, never ever, I've listened to so many people with so much patience. I have, and to make it worse, when I landed, I went straight to my hotel room. I said, I need to give myself a few moments of silence. And I was getting a phone call saying that there's a panel discussion that's going on, would you like to join? I came down, and the panel discussion was on, and Mr. Ram Madhav made me listen to the panel discussion. It is the first time in my entire existence that I've listened to a panel discussion and not spoken a word. It's a magical experience. India Foundation, thank you. And no, we are not going there, what you said. The journalist anchor who asked, we're not going there today. We're going to talk about democracy, dissent, and development, and everything else but that. You'll have to wait for that. So, bottom line is this. I'm a journalist. I don't like the status quo. But most journalists like the status quo. Journalists should hate the status quo. But in this country, which has given you the democracy to break every shackle, and for more than 70 years at India and 70 years told every journalist, go break the rules, the journalists of this country have been the most status quoist part of our system. And I wonder why. If you talk about democracy, development, and dissent, give it by any other word, you'd ask a startup guy, he'd say, what is dissent for you? It said, what happens in Silicon Valley is also dissent. We call it disruption. That's it. There's no difference between dissent and disruption. Dissent is essentially standing up and saying, I disrupt you. I don't like the way you're doing things. I have a right to exist in your space, but I'll do the things the way I like. You are nobody to teach me the rules, because if the rules were to be the same for the longest time, unchallenged, that would be a status quo. In my profession of journalism, my disruption is called an unwanted dissent. When I say I will give my opinion the way I want, freely, disregarding this bunch of people who call themselves left liberals, which is the biggest oxymoron in the world, actually. Because a leftist is not meant to be liberal, and a liberal can never be a leftist. When I say that I will break out of those shackles, I'm told you've broken the cardinal rules of journalism. You've done things which should not be done. You're standing out. You're stretching yourself too much. You're not therefore part of our system. And therefore I chose 10 years back to say, I don't want to be part of your system. And that is why I talk about Lutyens' Delhi, not with any disregard to the city, but with a determination that in the next 3 to 4 years, we will take the center of journalism in this country outside of Lutyens' Delhi for good. Believe me, that is an idea whose time has come. Don't get me wrong, I have a house in Delhi. But if this country's journalism is to grow, you have to take it psychosomatically out of the national capital of India. That is when it will be truly representative. I know this will pose a threat to many of the people who believe that it should remain, for obvious political reasons, the center of journalism in our country. But if journalism is to thrive and actually help the people of this country, then it must be forced out, cranked out of Delhi. Operate from Pune, Bangalore, anywhere, but not Delhi. Point number 2. The theme of this event today is democracy, development, and dissent. And actually, Ram Madhavji, it gives me great pleasure to be among you today, because these are 3 very powerful words. democracy, development, and dissent. And in a way, they are the true strength and fabric of our times. The beauty of democracy and at the same time the premise of development has been propelled by that fundamental thing called dissent. Dissent is the fulcrum of all change. I will only speak of journalism and media because that's all I know about. I've spent a little over 2 decades working in this industry now, and I can safely say this, that it is the power of fearless dissent which some journalists in India still have that is allowing us to revamp journalism that will not be imagined in the last 20 to 25 years. The next 5 years are the years of journalistic revamp in this country. That will be my dissent. I want to dissent against the way journalism is done in India. And I hope and believe that in whatever I do in the coming years, more and more journalists will stand by me as we dissent against the way journalism has been done. So there will be a dissent by journalists against journalists in this country, because there cannot be one strand of opinion in any profession in this country. Before I go into a rewind mode and I tell you a little bit about my vision of the future, I'd like to make a few points as to why dissent is so sacred to me fundamentally. Dissent is sacred because that is what I do every night. It gives me the power to have an opinion and air it, however uncomfortable it may make those at its receiving end feel. Dissent tells me that I don't have to pretend to be neutral in an issue where there is an obvious binary between right and wrong. Dissent tells me that I don't have to create a Wikipedia of journalism because it does not exist. Dissent tells me that it is a reflection of the power of this democracy, that as a journalist I say, this is my view, and I will not be a fence sitter between what I think is right or wrong. Now that can happen in a context of any discussion. Uniform Civil Code, Triple Talaq, Haji Ali, Sabri Malai, India-Pakistan relations. I'm not going to be neutral between India and Pakistan. I feel I'm more real than the people who pretend to be neutral between India and Pakistan. In our room today is someone I greatly admire, Ms. Taslima Nasreen. And Taslima ji, I haven't met you often, but I know that you are what you are today because you dissented. Because you were forced to leave your country. And I will never forget the silence of my fraternity when you were attacked in Hyderabad. Here is a lady, she faced violent hate here in India as well. And she stands here and says, this is my home. I'm touched. I too have connections from the country where you came from and from where you belong. But I saw that in 2007 where bricks were taken and thrown at you in Hyderabad. I'm asking this audience today, how loud was our shout that that was wrong? Or was it an objective whimper? Ask yourself, the protests were there, but a protest is not a protest unless it's loud. It has to be 8-column, front page, not page 7 single column. Taslima Nasreen attacked with bricks and stones at a book release function cannot be a whimper in our media. And that is why I dissent. I dissent against the media that did not shout when it should have and reduced itself to a whimper. Some of those same people today talk about the importance of free speech. Same people. And I sit there in my studio in Lower Parel and I say, this is why I wanted to resign from journalism in 2003. I came to Mumbai disheartened by this journalism. Disheartened by it. Because I knew that this journalism had been a co-opted journalism. I wanted to dissent against that journalism. I got my chance many years later when I came to Mumbai. I came to start a business channel. I turned it into a news channel. And I realized at some point that if I take my emotional experience of being a proud Indian, wrench it away from my heart, and deliver the news, that news will be fake news. Then there will be no difference between me and them. And though so, I dissented. And till today, I would dissent because I never want to be co-opted by them. At the same time, I'll say they have a right to have their views. Sometimes those views are amusing. Sometimes those views are overly defensive. Sometimes those views are over-intellectualized. I too have done an MPhil in social anthropology. I know how to use phrases here and there to dodge the issue, but I don't. Others do because they want to camouflage their opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, my dissent against the system is that I will not camouflage my opinion when it comes to free media. And therefore, and now I come to the critical point, the real dissent, the dissent of a journalist is going to come in this country. The season of change is about to come. I say to them, stand against me and try to stop me if you can. Stop the force. You cannot stop it. Because what is right and wrong is wrong. Place the power that you have on your side. But the people of this country will determine what is right for them and what is right for this country. And the people of this country are not foolish. I'm a restless person. I can't sit in one place, and monotony and stagnation is not in my character. Playing someone else's game is not in my character. Changing the game is in my character. All journalists know, good journalists know that good journalists, for them, towing the line is not in their character. Drawing new lines becomes the norm. Those who are holding people back today in journalism are not the reporters, are not the foot soldiers. They are the people at the top. And the new fleet, as new lines fleet into oblivion, once they become the norm, it is in the character of all good reporters in this country, good journalists, good content creators, to shake up the norm. So let's talk about the road ahead. I feel that we need to today revisit, reinvent, and redefine, and therefore create a dissent in what had become the status quo for Indian journalism, and I can specifically talk about Indian television journalism. And here is my broad vision for the next 3 to 5 years. One, we will disrupt the mirage that we have an independent media, and truly we will have an independent media. We would be lying to ourselves if we said that we have a truly independent media. This mirage of an independent media has gone on for far too long without anyone coming out and openly dissenting against it. Today I stand before you and I say, with no sense of shame, that in our 70th year of independence, it is about time that we give ourselves an independent media. And it is about time because, with experience, I will humbly submit to you that we have mastered the art of using Indian journalism to bring about waves of change in the last 8 or 9 years. Ask yourself, what has changed? Was India against corruption a moment of change? Was the coverage of 26/11 a moment of change? Was taking on Suresh Kalmadi a moment of change? Were these stories moments of change? Was Nirbhaya a moment of change? Was that change happening? Was the churn happening? Do we remember what happened between May 2010 and January 2011 when 6 big scams from Kargil for profit, Devas, ISRO, Aircel Maxis, all broke one after the other? And I sat and once found myself in a room facing the then Prime Minister of India, who had decided to speak. Which itself was breaking news. And I sat there. I was number 13, there were 16 editors there. And I almost had given my personal bodyguards. And as I sat there, one editor said, "Oh, you've reached the high table of journalism." I said, "Well, here I am." I'll never forget it. January 2011. And every editor before me had this wonderful convivial conversation with the Prime Minister. India was raging. Every night we were going on about the scams. 2G, Devasis Row, Kargil for profit, everything else. The media in Delhi wanted to avoid it, but the shout was so loud from the studio in Lower Parel that everybody had to follow it. And yet when they sat in that room, the conversation was about the economy, was about agriculture, everything but the scams. And one editor even asked, what is your message for Sachin Tendulkar? Live press conference. And I sat to myself and I said, what's going on here? And then I remembered that's why I wanted to quit journalism in 2003. And here I was with the high priests of journalism in that room. And I asked the question to the Prime Minister about the story I was then following, which was the Devasis Row deal. 4 levels of clearances from Space Commission. The person sanctioning at every level was also the person authorizing it. Never happens in any corporate structure of the world. I was asking the question, and I was stopped by Mr. Harish Khare, then, I think, media advisor to Prime Minister, who said, this is not an interrogation of the Prime Minister, etc. I persisted, and then the Prime Minister pulled out a written reply and read it out. I will not forget that moment. And I'm asking you here today, why should we allow that system to continue any longer? You tell me, should we? Should we step aside and say, but this is the way it's done? What do you know? I don't know anything, but that's good for us. It's good for us that we don't know. It's bad for them that they know because they know too much. So, it is time we give ourselves an independent media, because it is time that the media which claims to be independent is tested for its maturity to regulate itself. It is time we give ourselves an independent media because it's time the Indian media's fearlessness is tested when it is answerable to nobody but itself. And it will make our spines erect, and we'll see a story in the eye for what it is, and we will pursue it for the change it will bring, and nothing more, not one additional consideration. A second point about the dissent that lies ahead in the media is that we will make sure, and I say it with considerable pride, and there are journalists in this room, even if you disagree with me completely and have never agreed with me on anything, from my positions on JNU to Augusta Westland to Ishrat Jahan and Pakistan, and I know there must be at least some in the room who disagree with me on all these issues, they will agree with me on what I'll say next. Because we are going to make sure that in this phase of dissent, the monopoly of money is broken. Money, money. They say what stands between you and the audience is money. We prove that money, the deployment of monetarily loaded resources, which lots of existing media houses also say, let's do a ringside defense. We have more money. But money is not a differentiator in today's day and age. Because I have reached you already. I put out my phone, I can do a periscope, I've reached you. It's a fact. Come on, let's fight. Put your money, your distribution, your money, whatever. Put hundreds of crores. Let's tell you that I am saying this to you today. Money can buy you the assets to put out the news, but it cannot buy you the ability to do news. You agree with me? Money can buy you the infrastructure, a big building, nice cameras, studios, equipment. I sometimes invite my competitors to watch where I've been doing the news from. They should watch. And then benchmark it with what they have. But money can't buy you the journalistic instinct on a story. The second point, the third point actually on the dissent that lies ahead, and I hope I'm proven right and not proven wrong, but I would like to say this with you that even if I'm proven wrong, even if I cannot achieve to do what I want to do, I think it's a risk worth taking. I believe it is. We will break out of the bubble of conventional content centers and let our journalism define new centers. I am asking you, what can Noida do which MG Road, Bengaluru cannot do? And I am not focused on the geography. It's not about the geography. When I sit in my small newsroom in Lower Parel, and this will be a disturbing thought for existing people, they'll say I'm focusing too much on the geography. I'm not. There's a thought process behind it. Why is a political source-based story more significant for news channels when a private hospital in Orissa's negligence killed 21 people in a fire in ICU? Analyze the response to the SUM hospital fire between Times Now and all other channels. It's not about the geography. I'm not making a flippant remark. I flip channels and ask myself, why standing outside Parliament hoping on a news development, such a critical part of television news that today you ask any journalist, where do you want to be? I want to be a Parliament reporter. I want the badge. You check out when Parliament session happens, half the reporters of any channel are standing outside Parliament, as if there's no story happening anywhere else. There are thousands of millions of stories elsewhere, like mothballs, they are thrown away. Since I am talking about the future, I will say that there will be a shake-up soon, and even if I don't do it, someone's going to do it. That will disrupt and uproot the national capital as the center of journalism. And the fourth point is this, and it's already happening in incipient germane ways. Don't resist it. We will redefine news gathering and engagement. When we disrupted TV news 12 years ago, our primary motivation was to give the citizens of this country a direct voice to become the agents of change. We wanted our newsroom to become an activist middleman who takes the voice of the people, broadcasts it, mobilizes them, and brings about change inside Parliament, in mindsets, and sometimes pressures enough to influence the reopening of courtrooms too. Justice to the citizen is at the core of my journalistic philosophy. As I stand before you, I will admit that there has been a sea of change digitally over the last 12 years. So I speak to you about driving descent into the future. It is only holistic for me to recognize that the very engagement with the viewer has changed dramatically with the tools we have now in 2016, because we will become the direct platform for citizens in this country as India becomes the second largest user of smartphone users with 220 million today and over 350 million smartphones in the future. That's my future and that is my screen. Engagement will not be restricted to Twitter handles. That will become a sideshow. So those of you who are spending too much time on Twitter, don't do that. I don't. We have 462 million internet users, right? We have between 3G and 2G users which use significant bandwidth. We're sitting between a possibility of 2018, 350 million Indian users with 3G and 2G connections. So this wave of disruption, the legacy guys are not going to be able to play it. This is for the new age. The new wave of disruption will directly give power to the fingertips of a digitized India that uses the digital screen not as a second screen but a primary screen over television. And I'm telling you, it's not going to be played in the traditional way. And if traditional players think they can morph themselves to it, best of luck. Fifth point, we will make our descent drive us to the global stage. This descent will be so powerful and so ambitious that, believe me, we will go global. I finally am telling, that will be our biggest singular descent. It will be a descent not limited to India, but a descent that goes global. We have been insulated by our own ambitions. We already have among us journalists who have made it their resolve to end the perpetuation of misogyny, even if it means taking on religion. Journalists elsewhere in the world don't do it. Only journalists in India do it. Why should these same Indian journalists not be doing global news? How long will we do JDU versus BJP? We can. You got to think at the next level. We have among us journalists who have open dates on the structure of the judiciary, even if it makes a respected pillar of our democracy uncomfortable. That is the fearlessness which defines us. Across the world, journalists don't do that. BBC and CNN journalists don't do that. Why should these Indian journalists not think of creating a next wave? We already have journalists among us who not only run with cameras behind those who they demand accountability from, even if it means that certain doors may not be open to them. We put a razor focus on a story. These stories like Lalit Kate and others don't happen seasonally, globally. You have stories, but to have this power of a story that makes the Indian Parliament take notice is not something that happens seasonally, globally. It is a uniquely Indian phenomenon. And it is being done by young, motivated, passionate Indian journalists. Unleash them upon the world. So, we will redefine global television, and that will be our greatest descent. Television, media. And it is about to happen. So to close, I want you to be optimistic about the future, because the future is only about dissent now. The future will be explosive, fearless, and uncompromising. From the Doordarshan days, which brought the wave of private television, we slumped to the emergency, and out has come a media now which is challenging at every nook and corner, even those in power who try to run from them. The big disruption is now about to come. So, ladies and gentlemen, from whatever I have learned, we are on the brink of the biggest disruptions, the biggest dissents, which will strengthen our democracy for years to come. Let's not fight it. Let's welcome it with open arms this time. Thank you.